Hello everyone, it's time to get started. I'm Scott Merrick, Director of Marketing here at Onvia, and I'd like to welcome everybody to today's webinar, 3 Reasons Government is Buying Technology. As some of you may have noticed, this is a little bit of a new time for us, so we're trying to see if we can accommodate some of our East Coast viewers with a little bit earlier time. Of course, the West Coast, we've started earlier as well, so let us know how that works out. We'd be curious if this is a better time for people or if you'd like to go back to the Wednesday time that we've previously had, which is around 1 o'clock on the East Coast and around 11 o'clock on the West Coast. So we'd love your feedback on that. So today, I have the pleasure of bringing in a couple of our government business experts, Zach Priest and Ronit Cohen. Zach is one of our technology business consultants at Onvia. He helps our IT and telecommunications client create winning strategies for government contract opportunities. His collective experience is valuable to them to help identify the best opportunities to pursue and the most important information needed to win. He also has actual government experience working as a legislative aide. So he was more than a page, he actually knows how government works. He knows both the agency and the vendor side of government contracting and has really been an asset to a lot of our prospects and clients. Ronit Cohen has over 25 years of consulting experience, much of it in the IT space. She manages our team of government IT consultants and is recognized for her technology acumen and client focus. She is constantly helping clients find innovative ways to identify opportunities and partner in the public sector for technology projects. So today, we're going to take a look at the current technology environment and some of the trends that we see. We'll identify some key areas of opportunities, and we're going to focus on what we think are some really good strategies for technology businesses to win more government contracts. We'll talk about the 3 reasons that state and local governments are buying technology right now and why we think it's a particularly rich area for focusing on your business to win this government business. So to start off with, I want to speak a little bit in terms of some of the technology trends that we're sort of seeing in the marketplace and where IT spending is occurring. As many of you are likely aware and are probably involved in, government is an area where we see sort of a lot of IT spending. In fact, it is the largest area for government spendings at all levels, including federal, state, and local. This hasn't always been the case. I should note that in my career, I've worked for a number of technology companies, government agencies. Have typically been the last to adopt technology. So this has taken a dramatic turn in recent years, and now they're becoming more influencers and innovators and early adopters for technologies. Now, much of the credit for that goes to companies like yourselves. In many cases, you're influencing how technology is being used and adopted by the government. State and local government spending is growing at an annual clip of around 3%, and it's expected to grow to about $68 billion by 2018. At the federal level, the market is approximately $75 billion, but it's expected to decline by about 8% a year until 2015. Now, about half of the spending that we see out there is at the federal civil level and half at the state and local level. Where we're really seeing the good growth, as noted, is at the state and local level. Now, where we track contracts, we're currently seeing, in terms of the number of contracts that are open today, about 1,800 contracts for IT and telecom alone. And this is just at the state and local level. So there's a fairly even split at the state and local level with similar areas of focus. So we see good opportunities for spending in each, with IT services leading the focus in each. Also, according to Gartner Group, which tracks IT spending, 3 areas of focus for government technology investments that we're seeing are cloud computing, mobile technology, and IT modernization. There are also significant ongoing investments for IT professional services and big data management. So we see similar trends in the contract opportunities that we publish from agencies. So let's talk a little bit, let's move on to our discussion with Zach and Ronit Thanks for joining us today. Great to have you on board with us. Let's kick off our discussion a little bit with some of the things that you're seeing and hearing from our clients and prospects. Why is government changing its technology focus? Zach, what's your take on some of the logic for the changes we are seeing for government embracing technology today?
Good morning, Scott. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for having me on this call today. One of the trends that we're seeing is agencies are having to be more efficient and connected than they ever have been before. They can't operate as independently as they once could in the past, and there are a few reasons for this. The first, clearly it's not cost effective. Agencies are grouping together and sharing the cloud is the best way to do this. The second is they need more integrated communications simply because they work together more than they ever have. Information sharing simply improves purchasing efficiency.
Thanks, Zach. So agencies are really looking for vendors to help. As I mentioned earlier, they're looking for the innovation in terms of how they implement some of the key technology, that they need to be effective, and that they need to be relevant. So, modernization and efficiencies are really key. What kinds of technology needs are we seeing from the agencies today?
Absolutely. There are several, but let's talk about the largest areas of growth. The first is obviously big data. With the legislation that's been passed by the Obama administration, there's a greater need for compliance than there ever has been. So we're seeing a huge uptick in ERP solutions, financial management solutions, and healthcare management solutions. And these are critical components of these agency requirements. The second is outdated legacy system upgrades. We're seeing huge bids, RFPs, and budget line items for tech refreshes. Agencies have been relying on aging equipment for quite some time now, so they're spending quite a great deal of money in upgrading this equipment, and they're leveraging the cloud to do this. For example, using VoIP and unified communications versus your traditional landline allows them to talk between each other, but additionally save costs on these monthly spends.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. We'll talk about this a little bit, but in terms of those monthly spends, it's sort of a shift over from these big sort of hardware purchases that you think of as sort of in a capital expenditure environment to more of an operational expense of using services. What about the cloud again in terms of its service model?
Yeah, that's a great segue. So cloud services are providing agencies with a level of transparency that they didn't have before. Cloud service providers are able to provide the agencies with measurable ways to track ROI, and as a result, companies with the right solutions are able to break into a market and build relationships and ultimately influence the buying decision with these agencies and establish themselves with a reputation as a trusted vendor.
Okay. And then what about security? This seems to be a constant challenge as technology changes, and we're seeing all these, sort of attacks on systems, etc.
I'm really glad you brought that up. That's another great point. With the recent technological advances in computing, communications, software, and hardware, we're finding that government agencies are relying heavily on their digital infrastructures. And as a result, they've got a great need to protect their strategic assets and ensure a trustworthy and secure environment.
Great. I think, I'd add just a point of emphasis here too, is the fact that cybersecurity is almost changing daily. So there's great opportunities for vendors that are operating in this space to really establish some strong agency relationships to keep them up to date on what's trending, what kind of technology can be applied to make sure that they're current so they're not under things like cyber attacks and the like. So it's really a rich opportunity area. Ronit, in your experience, what sort of consulting opportunities are rising out of the increased spend on technology?
I'm seeing that business and consulting is taking on a large role in building technology requirements. Consultants are being hired by both the agencies as well as vendors. On one hand, they can help agencies construct technology plans and systems. And on the other hand, they work with vendors who not only need help finding opportunities, but also need help managing projects once the contract is awarded. For instance, building an infrastructure plan or schematic can be very complicated and can involve a diverse group of experts both within and outside the agency. So therefore, spending time researching the contract opportunities and strategically targeting agencies actually places the consultant in a unique position to work with vendors who need help finding the opportunities and outlining the project schematic in a way that helps position them to win the award.
Yeah, traditionally agencies have tended to be pretty siloed when it comes to technology. Are you seeing changes there? I mean, are they starting to work with each other?
I certainly am, Scott. We're seeing a lot of agency collectives in this industry. There are a lot of efficiencies to be gained by agencies working with each other, which translates into increased spending as budgets are shared. There are many areas of opportunity within the software and hardware vertical.
So, Renee, what are the three main reasons that government is buying technology today? We talked a little bit about them, but give us a little bit of a focus point and put an exclamation point on it for us.
Certainly, Scott. Well, there's a myriad of three reasons why the government is investing more in technology. And today, we're going to focus on three of the top big ones. We're seeing changes in policy and mandated activities in document management when agencies are required to have up-to-date and robust technology systems. The first one that we're going to focus on today is big data. Government agencies are both managing big data and launching research programs to address the challenges presented. Visualization has been shown to be an effective tool not only for presenting essential information in vast amounts of data, but also for driving complex analysis. Big data and analytics and discovery present new research opportunities to the computer graphics and visualization community. Second, while they have been slow to adopt because of legacy system investments, state and local governments can no longer rely on the older systems. Significantly, more government spending is going towards infrastructure as a service cloud product. Government agencies are finding that they can run custom-built applications inside externally managed computer servers. Plus, we're seeing more cooperation amongst agencies who find efficiencies in shared resources and systems.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, and I mentioned earlier about sort of the advantage also moving from the cloud from a financial perspective, and I think this is sort of a little bit of a nugget that our audience should take away today. And one of the big reasons that Renee didn't necessarily talk about, but that paying for cloud services is an operational expense as opposed to a capital expenditure. So it's kind of hard to say, well, why is that important? But it means that the assets don't have to be owned for a long period of time. It's not the same, in the commercial marketplace. It's really quite a bit different in the government space, but there's still a lot of hurdles to go through to justify an operational expense, as they're more controllable. And if you think about sort of services, including the cloud, it allows for flexibility when changes are needed. So you can swap service providers. It's a lot easier than swapping out infrastructure. So I think there's terrific opportunity for our audience to think about positioning their capabilities as services. So even in the area where you might be a hardware provider, instead of selling those as a capital expense, it might be leased out, and so they could be sold as more a service that they could switch out if they needed to. We're seeing this trend not only for cloud, but a number of business services areas. Renee, let's move on to the third reason.
The third reason that we're going to cover today is cybersecurity, because it's a very real and serious concern. Technology advances in computing, communications, software, and hardware change the way citizens, business, and governments interact today. Our cultural dependence on digital infrastructures has made the protection of data and strategic assets a top concern for agencies today.
Outside of these three, I think there's a couple others that are worth mentioning. Mobile has got to be a key focus area. Zach, what about mobile?
Absolutely. It may sound cliche, but mobile is the wave of the future. More and more we're finding that agencies have a decentralized staff. So, for example, Border Patrol agents, inspectors, and social workers, need to be able to communicate, and there's a need for them to be able to be tracked. As this trend increases, we're going to see a greater need for mobile solutions.
Okay. One other one that I'd bring up there, too, is what we call BYOB, bring your own, device. There is probably more acceptance by agencies than there have been in the past to be able to leverage the use of people's mobile devices. In many cases in the past, we saw people like the president, he'd be carrying 3 or 4 mobile devices. Well, now they're carrying one. And so they're integrating a lot of those applications onto the personal device of individuals. So we're seeing that corporations, governments are starting to, give up the need to control the devices, and they're getting a little bit more comfortable with using those devices.
And if I could actually interject, that is a really great point, and we're seeing a huge uptick in that program, especially in the public safety and LMR space. These public safety agencies are able to actually integrate their cell phone rather than carrying expensive radio equipment, and they're able to communicate in a much more reliable fashion than they once were.
Thanks, Zach. So how is big data going to continue to develop, Renee?
Government organizations have increased big data spending for improper payment systems, indicating the desire to tackle fraud, waste, and abuse within the agencies, as well as target upfront errors in revenue collection. While agencies are assessing how to manage, leverage, and store big data, not many have actually addressed the challenges associated with the utilization of content and the issues associated with merging large amounts of data onto a single platform. Vendors need to acknowledge the challenges here and tie big data solutions back to specific agency workflows.
Yeah, I mean, it's really a significant issue, and it's not going to get any smaller anytime soon, if ever. At Onvia, I'll just tell you, in terms of our experience, many of you may not know this, but when you think about that, we're managing a lot of data for government contracting opportunities, award history, future spending plans. There's a lot of data behind that, and we track it across the United States for 90% of the spend that's out there. And so for us, that represents anywhere between 3 to 5 terabytes of data. So just a company like us is, really working with very, very large sets of data, often bigger than the Library of Congress. So again, it's going to be more and more sort of difficult to manage it going forward. But also, another important point about it is it's the analysis of the data. So how do you slice it, dice it, find meaning out of it, get to what is pertinent in it. And so I think, there's also just sort of a huge opportunity and challenge for the government to say, what does all this data mean? What do I do with it? How do I get to sort of key indicators and trends that will influence what we're doing in the future? So let's move on a little bit now and talk about some specifics. Some of the opportunities for vendors in the IT space and what they have. How do companies intelligently go after opportunities? We talk about doing more than responding. Renee, what else should they do?
Vendors today have the opportunity to build relationships with agency contacts and then provide ideas on being innovative and integrate solutions to break through legacy silos and offer cost and effective ways to integrate the technology. Government agencies are focused on improving their technology infrastructures, but they don't always have the internal expertise to design the schematics and define the sustainable systems they need. Vendors can help agencies with their plans and establish their reputation as a trusted advisor. For instance, when the program goes out to bid, the vendor can help write the specs and increase the probability of winning the contract.
Great. A lot of vendors that we work with are reluctant to necessarily get into the space. So when you think about technology, a lot of times you think about the really big providers. You think about IBM. You might think about Amazon even for cloud. You might think of Dell, for hardware. So these big companies. What about the smaller companies or the less experienced ones? Are there opportunities there as well?
I'm glad you asked, Scott. I have a good story for you. One of my clients that would be considered a small business came to me because they were frustrated. They've been spending valuable time and resources responding to bids and RFPs that have already been published. And on average, they're winning, I'd say, 1 out of 5 contracts. This marketing firm felt that they didn't have a chance to beat the old school companies that they've been winning these contracts repeatedly year after year. So we analyzed their process and agreed that they needed to change their direction and be proactive. We strategically identified which government contracts they wanted to pursue and kept track of the competitor contracts and when they're expiring, including any extensions. Then they started calling the agencies as early as 6 months before the contract expired. They built relationships with these agencies to better understand what the agency was actually looking for. They learned that these agencies weren't always happy with their vendors, and then they would share how they could provide a better service versus the larger companies. And Scott, this method brought them success.
Yeah, that's an awesome point. And we really try to emphasize this all the time because we've got a lot of information that we can provide to our clients that will help them be more intelligent about going after business. We've had experience with many sort of prospects, I'll say in the past, that have kind of had a spray and pray method of going out there, and they just respond to all sort of the bids and RFP opportunities that are out there, and they hope that they'll win. But if you're really smart, you start to work on what's sort of the relationships you want to have. You research where there's a better fit for your business, and then you respond to those bids that you think that you can really have a chance of success winning. And combining that with sort of those relationships where you've got a relationship and you've influenced the spec, your probability of winning is going to be a lot higher. I think it's also worth mentioning, because a lot of times these are, not always, but a lot of times smaller businesses. We have a lot of our clients that are veteran-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, or minority-owned businesses. In the technology space, are there set-asides for these companies, dedicated funds that, agencies are looking at to say, we're going to actually have part of our spending dedicated to these businesses?
There certainly are, Scott. There are a lot of opportunities out there. So imagine here you can actually work with a larger company who is the prime on a particular project, and these minority-owned businesses can actually be a sub. So this now actually enables them to forge partnerships, which is a win-win situation, and at the end of the day, a great way to help eliminate your competition.
So companies also have the opportunity to track contracts already awarded to see where their solution might be a better fit for the agencies. In particular, and to Roniat's point, smaller companies can educate themselves on a specific budget line item and then present themselves as more agile, more hands-on, and more available than the incumbent vendor. It's funny, I was actually consulting with a client who did document management the other day, and they've been really banging their head against the wall trying to figure out how to achieve their public sector revenue target. And so we were looking through their awards and saw, the win rate wasn't as good as it should be. And so we looked at an opportunity that they lost and then noticed that it was actually a budget line item 2 years prior. And so, I said to him, if you had known about this, if you had seen this budget line item when it was actually published, would it have made a difference in the outcome? And he said, that's a stupid question. Of course it would have. So it really makes sense to start looking at these things ahead of time, build the relationships, and establish yourself as a trusted vendor.
That's a really good point, Zach. Thanks for bringing that up for us. It also makes me think about partnering opportunities. How should companies find companies that are already doing business with the government? We've sort of talked about the opportunity for smaller business there. I think there's, in many cases, a good strategy to pursue is to work with the bigger companies.
Absolutely. Again, awards are a great resource to find these companies that have experience and also plan holders lists, so you can proactively reach out and see where your solution might be a great component and partner with that larger vendor to increase your chances of winning the award.
Okay. So Renee, we often talk about getting ahead of the bidding process. How can companies do this?
Well, we need to focus on the spending plans. They are really key.
So the budgets, what are the spending plans?
Right. So think of it as capital improvement plans, future spending, so plans and budgets, meeting notes. So these can be really hard to find, but once you find them, they can be an advantage to help you get in early and help you influence that RFP process. So now imagine, Scott, knowing about these agencies' expenditures well in advance. So let's say an agency is allotted $5 million to spend within the next 5 years. They may even break it down year by year as to what they're going to spend. So this gives you an idea about what they're going to allocate with these adopted expenditures. Now, as I mentioned earlier, with this business intelligence, vendors can actually build relationships with these agencies and establish themselves as a trusted advisor. When the contract goes out for bid, the vendor can help write the specs, which increases the probability of actually winning the contract.
Great point. So, those sources are, as you mentioned, somewhat hard to find. I'll just note that we do have all those pieces of information, the meeting notes, the CIPs, the budgets, all in one place. So when you think about that process that you go through, you'd have to go to the agencies, you'd have to go to their websites. It's hard to accumulate that. So there is a terrific advantage in signing up for a service like ours that can help you get that information. So let's summarize a little bit. Now we're going to move on to some of the questions that are coming from our audience. Some of the best opportunities for IT contractors focused on government opportunities are in the government. So to connect with agencies, there's some things that are important to do. Align the solutions and services to help improve efficiency. Efficiency is a key focus for the agencies. Demonstrate innovative solutions that focus on helping government agencies apply technologies and help them gain leverage across agencies for everything from purchasing to revenue generation. Help the agencies use technology to do business smarter. And this is really key. In many cases, agencies don't necessarily have all the ideas. So going back to sort of that relationship focus, helping them to think about, here's a clever way that you can apply technology to be more efficient. Here's how you can apply technology to analyze that big data. Here's how you can apply technology to think about sharing with agencies, everything from purchasing to thinking about new projects. These are really areas where, again, IT telecommunications can apply their innovative thinking to help agencies out. They just don't have the resources and people to do this on their own. Analyze the needs to get the most out of the budgets and help prioritize projects that will have the greatest impact on revenue and cost reduction, helping with collaboration that gives government new opportunities to achieve their goals. Help government organizations leverage existing legacy investments and create the longer-term view for them to migrate to the next generation infrastructure and service environment. So there are many areas of technologies that can be explored for government business, like mobile computing, public safety, interactive public displays, audio-visual, and much more. New technologies being developed mean new opportunities come up every day for potential business with the government. The trends we're seeing for 3 reasons covered in this webinar: big data, cloud computing, and cybersecurity are going to continue to grow and expand as well as others. So Onvia can help stay ahead of the curve and help you be prepared to react quickly to the types of businesses that match your company's products and services. So let's move on to questions. I think we've got a number from the audience here that I want to go over. Starting out with, what are the types of agencies that are most likely to invest in technology? Zach, any view on that?
Boy, I mean, it really varies by agency and depending on the technology. So, in public safety, for example, the huge investments that we're seeing are case management solutions and LMR solutions. In administrative agencies, we're seeing huge investments in cloud and document management. It really varies, but the main point, and I think the best point, is that the IT spend is going up, that all of these agencies, regardless of what they do, are buying and making IT purchases.
Great, thanks. So what seems to me the major difficulty in establishing relationships in areas where no prior contact or relationship has existed? Renee?
What I'm finding is where our clients are today and where they're succeeding is when they're actually tracing back the history to best understand how they can win the contract in the future. So think of it like this. They realized that if they had known about a contract either 6 months to a year in advance, they could have actually won this contract. So Scott, tell me, would knowing about your incumbent, who's actually holding a contract, the value of a contract, know maybe 6 months before a value to you?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that would be critical for us in terms of developing our strategy. So it's a very good point. Let's see. All these new and upgraded solutions need to have people trained. Is training always thought to be a side note? A box is only a box until it's properly installed, used, and maintained. Ideas and suggestions. So I think, from my perspective, it's a great point. A really significant point, because a lot of times people sort of think about it, as you pointed out, it's sort of a second thought. So I think it comes back to the relationship side. Really trying to make sure that as a service provider that you're making sure to include that component in the services you provide, that you make sure the agency is considering what to do, and also applying your experience with training. So in many cases, agencies may underestimate the amount of time that it takes to get trained on new systems. So that's going to be a key point as well. At a high level, is federal, state, or local government seeking cloud aggressively? Any opinions? I've got one if you guys don't.
I know I'm seeing it in both. I mean, both federal, state, and local. I mean, even with sequestration, it's certainly still there.
Yeah, I think it's across the board as well. One note on federal, and maybe even thinking about sort of one area of federal, if you think about DOD, for instance, they get a little bit concerned about security. So I think one of the areas that they'll implement cloud infrastructure earlier is where that they don't have those concerns. And so you can think again of state and local opportunities are really rich for this, so that they don't have as much to worry about. Zach, what's your view?
I think on another note, there's 12,000 school districts nationwide, and we're seeing a huge uptick in VoIP and UC opportunities within these school districts. So they're leveraging the cloud to actually share documents between the schools and establish, a means of communication at a much lower cost. So I definitely wouldn't count them out.
Great. So we've mentioned capital improvement plans, or SIPs. So it's a great question that comes up. What sorts of technology are being planned for capital improvement plans? Because this is probably more on the infrastructure side. Views on that, guys?
Well, what I'm seeing is, it's as far as plans, they're out there. I mean, we're seeing it in every single vertical. We're tracking every vertical. So at the end of the day, when we look at these opportunities, they're all there. What you need to do is you need to know well in advance how these agencies are spending their dollars in order to plan and build those relationships in order to win those contracts.
Great. I think another area, we've talked a lot about big data. So there's probably two areas to think about the use of big data. One is obviously to leverage the cloud. In many cases, though, agencies, especially ones that might be concerned with security, will think about data centers. And so I think there's some shared opportunities here. So where you'll see multiple agencies trying to think about, well, how can we manage those infrastructures more effectively? And so they might agree to share a data center. And so I think those are good areas that we might find opportunities where there's budget plans or CIPs into the future. Let's see. Where do I start? How can companies position themselves to meet their public sector growth goals? Zach?
That's a great question. And the best way to really start planning for the future is to look at the past. Look at your awards, look where you've won and where you've lost and why. If you've lost because of a set-aside, there's really not a lot that you can do about that other than partnering with a company that has that specific set-aside. If you've lost to another vendor, you got to think about the fact that there are two ways to do business. You can do business in person, or you can wait to do business on paper alongside dozens of other vendors. So if you can find these opportunities in forward-looking spending plans and actually reach out and establish a relationship, you've got a foot up. You can really maximize your chances of getting spec'd in on the opportunity and ultimately influencing the buying decision.
Great, Zach. So we talked about this a little bit, but the question comes up again, and I think it's more of a process question. How can we get ahead of government contracts? What's the process for getting in early?
You need to be strategic about it. Identify which contracts you're actually interested in going after. So think of it like this. Here's you have a list of contracts that you know that you could have won. Okay, now they're being held by an incumbent. So now find out exactly when these contracts are actually going to expire. Find out if there's even any extensions and know what the value is. Do your homework. Look at the history. You can even read about the proposal. You'll even see the documents. You know exactly about this contract. So when you're actually calling the agency and getting to know them, and you know what, at the end of the day, they do business with who they trust and who they know. So by building that relationship, you have a better edge than someone else that's going in and just filling out a piece of paper and submitting the folder with their responsive proposal, which they hope. So this is how you're really strategic and how our clients, where I'm seeing my clients actually win today, by planning ahead and really understanding what that project is about. So it makes for a more of an intelligent conversation when you're actually calling these agencies.
Great. I think related to that, Rooney, there's another question we have out here, which is, what is the best way to build a relationship with the local government? So I'm taking from that question and sort of, again, back to process a little bit. How do you find the contacts?
Right. So, and that's the thing. And with Onvia, we do have the contacts. What's so nice about the project is we actually have all the information there at hand. So you're going to know who the agency is. You're actually going to even know who to contact. And most oftentimes, as you know, Scott, there's only one person that you can actually speak to in an agency. So you're going to know which person you can reach out to, who you can actually ask the questions to, and build that relationship with them.
Great. Let's see, a couple more here. What are some of the top sought after IT service opportunities out there?
You know what I'm seeing? Document management. And the fact is, I know we talked about it, and some, in the future we want to cover that subject because it's just so vast and broad. I mean, the data conversion, everyone wants to go paperless today. So there's a great deal of opportunity out there right now for them.
Yeah, it's actually a really good point. I was in sort of legal technology before, and so we were dealing a lot with litigation, patent litigation, and you would find warehouses of paper. And so in terms of improving efficiency, it's a really good point to think about, how can we move that into sort of electronic files as opposed to having all this space where we have to store documents. So very, very good area of focus. Let's see. How can we get audio-visual business without going to single-digit margin bids? That's a great question. I don't know if I have an answer for that one. Any thoughts on your side?
I think the best way to do it is getting in early. The real best option is finding that budget line item and reaching out saying, hey John, with say Miami-Dade County, I see that you've got a budget line item for $400,000 for digital signage coming up in 6 months. I'd really love to talk to you about our solution and how we can help you to implement and actually execute on that line item with a higher quality product. And the earlier you get in, the more likely you are to be able to sole source an opportunity. If you're just responding to a bid and there's already dozens of other vendors, probably a few embedded within the agency, the likelihood of getting out of that single-digit margin is really low.
Great. Kind of going back to an area of focus that we've been talking a little bit about is this relationship you have with the agency. So here's an attendee that's talked about the problem is that a large number of government staff will not take the meeting. I've spent years trying to get in front of staff in some government accounts, and I have all their names. So it's not just about finding the contact. So I'll comment on it, and then I'll let you guys comment on it. But one of the things I think it doesn't always work, but one of the things that's really important in terms of establishing that relationship is it is about, again, looking at the budgets, the spending plans, where you can make that connection with an idea that's going to get interest. I'm the head of marketing here at Onvia, and it's a challenge for us to say, how do you get the interest of people to be able to use their services? And you've got to have a hook. And so if you see, a direction that they're heading, and you are able to get to the contact within the agency that's, involved in sort of that direction, you can help them with innovation. And so it's marrying those two. And that may be an obvious strategy, and it may not always work. But I think that's the path that I'd be taking to try to get that relationship in a meeting established. Any other thoughts from you guys?
Well, and the fact is, Scott, it's not always the lowest price. Oftentimes they want that relationship of a particular vendor that they know they can rely on, rather than just this is the cheapest, and they don't even know if they're going to do a good job. So I feel like knowing that business intelligence is where they're going to get ahead.
Great.
Additionally, I consult today, but I've been in sales for a very long time. And what I found is that you really have, a few minutes to actually talk to a decision maker. You have to be relevant and actionable in what you say. Every word matters. So, rather than asking for the meeting, you got to tell them why it's important in 2 sentences or less. It's not an elevator pitch. It's a specific way that you can help them and that they can actually measure the ROI in working with you.
Great. All right, so I think we've about run out of questions. There are a couple here that I will note, though, weren't specific to just sort of the technology questions. One is somebody that came in late was wondering about the recording, and that will be sent in the next day or so along with the slides. So stay tuned for that. Another question is, do we offer any kind of certifications for our sessions? Not at this time. It's a great idea. If you want to contact me directly, I'd be happy to discuss that with you and see, where we might have that focus, because I think something like a certification might be great for a lot of our audience. So I appreciate that question. I think that is the majority of our questions. If there's any others out there, I would encourage you all to feel free to contact us. So if you would like to get a hold of me, or Zach, or Ronit, here we'll put their information, their contact information on our screen for you. Feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to, continue the conversation. Always willing to help out our prospects and clients think about doing business more intelligently with the government. So at this point, we'll end our presentation. And I want to thank you all for joining us today, and thank you, Zach and Ronit, very much for helping us with this very insightful discussion.
Thanks, Scott.
Take care and have a great day.